So I created the show to kind of shine a light on lovely ladies like yourself who are out there crushing it, to give us a moment to share our stories. So thank you for saying yes and for being on the show. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's great to see you, and I love what you're doing, and I always love talking to female producers as
Yeah.
well to share
Yeah.
the struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. The struggle is real. But I want to take it back a little bit to the beginning, how you found the business and how you got in it. Because ever since I've known you, you've been sort of on the acquisition side,
Right.
starting with, we met when you were at the Orchard, back when that was the Orchard before it became 1901. So just take us to the beginning of how you found this crazy business.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. It's something that's come up a lot in the last few days, just talking randomly with some friends about what's missing still in the kind of path from higher education to career in this
Mm,
business. If you're not already in the world of Hollywood or film, it's obviously filled with nepotism, and that can be both good and bad. Like I'm the beneficiary of that right now in some ways. Like I work for Robert Schwartzman's company, and he's the brother of Jason, and his
mm,
mother's Collier Shire, and all of that, you know, helps. But he's also like an incredible person and thinker and filmmaker. But compare it just shows like how our journeys were so incredibly different because he grew up in a family where being in film was like something that was a reality and something you knew you could do, and there was a path to it. Whereas
right.
I grew up knowing I wanted to major in film and study it and do something with film, but like, what does a job look like? What does a sales agent do? What does a producer do? The only job I really knew was director, and I don't think I even fully understood what that was.
Yeah.
I just knew I liked film and I was gonna study it in college, but I literally had like no plan or strategy for a long-term sustainable career in this business. So
Mm.
a lot of where I am today is just meeting the right people and luck and hustling. And making the right connections, which is something that I think we don't maybe talk about enough, just how much of a connector, you know a networking thing it really is, and who is so important in relationships, and keeping good sustainable relationships and respectful relationships is incredibly important. But
Yeah.
I just really, I was telling my boyfriend yesterday, I remember going to Wesleyan's Office of Career Services, and I was just this go-getter and ambitious, but I like had no idea, after being a film major there in a very selective program, how I would make any money or have a job doing this in any way. There was just no one in my world had ever done anything like that before. I
Yeah.
didn't know that you could go and, you know, um, if you're a writer, like show a script to an agent, and then if they like it, like get them to represent you. I had no idea the business side of things. There was absolutely no preparation for career in my college. And so I went to the career office, and I literally, this was pre, lots of email. It was like hand wrote letters to all these alumni film majors, and no one wrote back to me.
Oh.
um, but then I just continued to fall into it. My first job out of college was writing film synopses for a company that just like 10 a day. We didn't even watch the movies. We would just read a bunch of stuff about them, and then we would write these little blurbs that then went into like the kiosks you used to see at Tower Records.
Yeah.
uh, and then I was like, I need to go to grad school because I still don't know how to have a sustainable career. So I
Yeah.
went back to school, and then
Where
in
did
grad
you go?
to the new school,
Mm.
and I studied documentary specifically. I thought my plan at that time was to go into academia, and I was about to get my PhD, and then a friend just invited me randomly to the Hamptons. He had just started working at this startup that this rich guy who had made a lot of money was starting a like digital film distribution company, and was like, "Do you want to be my plus one to the Hamptons Film Festival? He has a house there." I'm like, okay, and he
That's
was
not a
impressed.
bad, yeah.
Yeah, he was impressed that I knew a lot about film and documentary, and he liked me, so he hired me, and that was really the luck of
So you
the
got
job.
your job at a party at a Hamptons Inn, yeah, a
Yeah.
Hamptons Inn. Oh my God, at the very different at the Hampton Film Festival.
Just an
um,
eccentric millionaire who wanted to start in film and was like, I like this
but
girl and she knows stuff. But
it's that thing, right, that everybody talks about. Oprah famously talked about it. That preparation meeting opportunity. You could have been just another person at this party, but because of all of your interest and your insight and your passion for documentaries, the stars aligned, and it was like the universe was like, here you go, my child, you're ready, and you
yeah,
were like, yes, and it just all aligned. But
it
it's like, yeah,
was.
the
Yeah.
years of stuff to get you to that moment, and that intersection is the key, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. But had I not just like made that relationship and had that friend
Yeah.
who was literally still at NYU and just an intern, and I think he just answered a Craigslist ad or something.
Mm.
Who knows where it would be today, honestly, because that
Yeah.
job taught me. I mean, that was really like a fake it till you make it moment because I had no idea what distribution even was. I just knew that I knew about film and I could probably pick good ones, but like I had to learn as I went, which I think is a lot of what producing is. Um, and I think it's a lot of what, I mean, any job is to get to the next level is learning as you go. But
Yeah.
as a producer, you have to wear so many hats and you really have to understand like all the different parts of the orchestra, and have all the left side and the right side and all the sides
All
of
the
the
sides. Yeah.
brain and some
Yeah.
mix of that. And it's just so much. And you
Yeah.
can't know it all. You can't be an expert in everything. So you also
No,
have
you certainly can't. And one of the things that I resent a little bit about our industry is that there is a negative sort of imprint on you if you don't know about something. That, like, how could you have known about that thing? There's like the facade we all have to put up, like, of using buzzwords to pretend like we really understand certain things when we kind of don't. You understand it on the other side of it. But
right.
I wonder
Yeah.
how much more we would get done if there was just like, just study what this actually means, actually learn it, so then you can have a conversation. But it's like hidden, tucked away in like some box that only like Harrison Ford can find in some movie. Like, it just feels like this impossible thing. And it's almost like a test, the people that can kind of play that game well enough when
Yes.
everybody knows. We all know, but if you can like pass the test, it's like being hazed almost, then we can let you in, and we'll share with you how shit actually gets done.
That's very true. It's very true.
Right, that's how it
They
feels.
purposely make those barriers so it's inaccessible because everyone's just so insecure about actually having a job in this industry and that's also why a lot of like groupthink happens and a lot of distributors don't take risks on things because there is such this like culture of, I hope this doesn't get me in trouble. Sorry, my industry, but almost like sheep like culture. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
A24 is bidding on it, then it must be good, even though I hated it. So
Right.
I'm gonna also that kind of thing. It's like once you're in
It's the
that pool,
FOMO. It's
it's
the FOMO business, right? It's like, well, everybody else wants it
absolutely
now. Wait, Jennifer Lawrence put her name on it. I guess it's good. Like, even though you passed on it and you
right.
trusted your instincts. And maybe, yes, she did
Exactly.
something incredible with that project. It's not to poo poo her. I don't know why she was like an example that came up. Just her name just popped in my brain.
Yeah,
I don't know
it would
Jennifer.
be
She's
great if
lovely.
Jennifer Lawrence put her name.
Right, but but you know what I mean? And then there's just like this frenzy of, I don't know, it's like this really
Right.
crazy, the FOMO of it is real. And then, yeah, then people on the outside are spinning their wheels being like, what do I make? What does the industry want? Like, how do I get my story told? And then eventually, after 5 years, if you're lucky, that's a short amount of time, you start to realize, oh, there are no rules. Like, nobody knows what the fuck they're doing. I'm just going to go tell my
Very true.
stories and find a way, you know?
That's
And
very true.
I hope I can help through these conversations, just help bridge that gap a little bit so that it can just take a little less time for people to get to those realizations. Because, like you said, there isn't anything, resources out there really for producers that aren't books written mostly in the 90s about what it was like to be a producer back then. And sadly, not much has changed, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
gotta inject some new energy into all of it. And I think with all of the movements that we're in the middle of, which is incredible, you know, with focusing on women and diverse stories and the Black Lives Matter movement and shining a light on all of that, which should have been just a thing, shouldn't have been a movement, but whatever.
Hmm.
Here we are. And so I do think it's like, pandemic aside, you know, a wonderful time to be alive.
Yes,
Yeah.
I would hope so. I mean, yeah, there's um I mean a lot of interesting things come from your statement. I think that COVID, for all of its really devastating and terrible effects, for some reason has injected new life into the film industry. Just in that, like it's making even studios are kind of their hands are so tied, even for executives, because they're so huge, and any change or any risk that they take has to be approved by like 10 people, and some of them are in
Right.
Japan because it's Sony, and they don't have the flexibility or just the freedom
Right.
to really pivot strategy really quickly or do something that might be risky or outside the box. But COVID really forced them to be like, maybe we don't need to do theatrical for 120 days first. Maybe there's different ways to do this.
Right.
Maybe we could try like a more experimental movie or a foreign film after Parasite. I mean, which
Right.
proved which was amazing, but yeah, studios are the last to adopt, and they're not.
They're dinosaurs. I get it.
Yeah,
They,
they're
yeah.
massive. Like you need thousands of people to move them.
It's like the
So,
ship metaphor, right? It's a
yeah,
massive ship that takes so much effort to like change 1 degree of course, where I feel like indie producers, smaller studios are like, I don't know. I just feel like I'm a dinghy. That's kind of how I feel. I'm
yeah,
just a little dinghy,
right.
just like going
I need
around, like
to
zooming
just
around.
figure out. Okay, wait. There's an iceberg. I'm just gonna turn it around. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna like hit it
Go
and
around it, like
try
try to
to
go
sink
around
it.
it. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I get it. It's been way of doing business for as long as the industry has been around. But what fascinates me about the studio system and the powers that be is, have they not seen what happened to the music industry? Have they not seen how
It
disruptors have
is.
already come in and changed the game? What Netflix has done, what Amazon is doing. So, like, how much more do they need to realize, like, hey, perhaps it's time to revisit the model? It's not really that sustainable anymore. Like,
Right.
people are going to TikTok, and that's like the
Exactly.
eyeballs on a TikTok thing are more than your thing you've spent all this time trying
I
to get out, you
I
know?
think that now, because COVID basically forced them into having to think about a life without theaters, which would be devastating. But
Yeah.
it also did force them to innovate and, mix up their windows and not have to do theatrical first. And maybe this is better if it premieres on HBO Max, or,
Right.
that kind of thing. Or we have a different kind of release strategy and not the same one for every film. And I think that a lot of what they learned from that will stay in place. And a lot of the studios will kind of adopt to a new, more forward thinking model. If only because
Yeah.
they just had to, or they would have, lost so much more money. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I'm curious how what insights you have to share, having sort of come up in the distribution acquisition side of the business at a time when it's been changing so rapidly, and just like what you've learned. You know, I think a lot of listeners are probably hungry to know, like, what is it like to acquire a film? Like, everybody makes a movie and dreams of it getting acquired and getting distributed. That's like, it ends with you, right? The buck stops with you. So what is that process like for you personally? What is it that you look for? What do you love about it? What are some things that people don't know that suck about it? You know?
Yeah, I mean, it taught me a lot as a producer as well,
Yeah.
to always be thinking about my audience, and not only that, but what do we want after the edit? Is it that, I mean, of course, everyone wants to go to Sundance and get a big deal and win all the Oscars, but like,
Right.
what is like a more
Realistic
realistic,
path. Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
also financially stable path so I can pay back my investors and go on to the next one? What's like a sustainable path for my career? As opposed to like that magical thinking of like, we'll go to Sundance and be the next Little Miss Sunshine. Because
Right.
one of the biggest things I think that filmmakers get surprised by when I tell them is that Sundance and those festivals, um, it's so political and it's so much about your connections. And if you're repped by one of the big agencies, and or if you came up in the Sundance Labs, or if you have the right champions behind you, this is not it's a myth, I think, that you can just apply to Sundance and get picked out of the pile unless you have someone who's in the industry already who's gunning for you.
Right.
It just doesn't work like that. Getting into Sundance is a political campaign. And it has nothing to do with the quality of your film if you're rejected. It truly doesn't. It really has to do with who you know.
Right. And I think it used to be like that at one point when Sundance started, but it's when the industry started seeing, oh, this is a place where you can discover, and they did what they do with all things, and they, you know, politicized it, and they got it sponsored by a bunch of people, and it's become just another shade of the same color effectively.
Yeah. And I think that really surprises people because they've heard the myth of getting discovered at Sundance just from like the
They're
Kevin
thinking,
Smith myth, or
right, Mark Duplass, like when that was still a thing, where you could make a
right.
movie for
And
$3 and like it would blow people's minds because the
right. And
cameras had
that
just been, you
did
know, yeah,
happen sometimes, but that's
yeah,
not the sign. And I mean, I started in distribution 15 years ago, but really after this first startup company, I went to producing for 10 years and then got back into it because I wanted healthcare and stability.
How dare you? Yeah,
I mean, and that because I was producing docs, and that was before Netflix and all the streamers came up and started paying a lot of money for them and making doc producing more viable than it ever had been in the past.
yeah,
So I've seen that explosion. I first started buying films before Netflix and Amazon started coming in with those like absurd numbers and driving up the prices for everyone.
right,
It quickly, after 2 years at the Orchard, it quickly became a seller's market because you had Netflix stepping in and paying ridiculous prices that would never make sense for a traditional distributor,
right,
but somehow work within their economics, which is like subscriber based. So they can just they have essentially a different economy, and they can throw out like $3 million without even thinking about
right,
having to make it back or their budget. So it just changed the equation completely. And I think some of that for the good for filmmakers, and a lot of it not good.
right.
But it's good in that it has been driving up price points, which is good for the filmmakers who get those deals. I also though think that now it's created more of a divide between sort of the 1% of producers and everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, look at Palm Springs, last year with Hulu. Like, that was a little bit of a slap in the face, I think, because it's like, really, you couldn't have taken that and bought like
Right.
6 different movies for like, because that budget was like 3 million, I think. Like, and all that money didn't go to the crew's pockets. Like, and I know my AD team actually from Sylvie's Love went right immediately after our production to that movie, and I know how hard it was for them, and it's like there's no support really for the middle class, the working class of
Yes.
Hollywood, which is often not talked about. And but that's
Hmm.
where most people end
Yeah.
up. I think it's like we all have, like you said, the dreams of being the 1% of indie filmmakers and having first look deals, but not many people reach those goals. And so you're just kind of going from project to project. And as these budgets keep getting smaller, it's like, how does anybody sustain a livelihood in production specifically that is so demanding of like your time and your body, like it's grueling, like the hours, like the people that go grips and camera assistants who go from like one job to the next to the next. And I'm like, you're literally working 300 days out of the year. And they're like, yeah, I need to support my family. I need to make
Yeah.
sure I can qualify for my health insurance at the end of the year. And it's like, that's not the glamour, sexy part of showbiz, kids. Like, you're not going to see anybody talking about that on the red carpet. No lounge sponsored at Sundance is going to
Right.
be
They don't get
bringing
to
this
go
shit
to the
up.
red carpet.
No, if they even get invited, and that is
Yeah.
the underbelly of it. It's all about the glitz and the glamour and pushing that forward. And I get it. That's why we are all lured into the business to some extent. And I love that part of it. I don't want it to go away. But my goal is to just remind people that if you're living for those moments, which are so few and far between, if you get to even experience them, you're chasing the wrong high and you're in for a very disappointing journey because you're not going to be able to control if that happens, how often it
Right.
happens for you. So you have to really love the journey. So like the day to day of getting to do this, whether you're a writer or an actor or a producer, because it's a grind. So
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
if you think about the ultimate frustrating job where you can get paid a lot but never see anything made, it's screenwriter. Like, that's a great symbol for what Hollywood can be, meaning I have a lot of screenwriter friends who consistently get paid $150,000 to write scripts. And there's a lot for writers right now because everyone's in development because
Right.
production is slowed because of COVID. So
Right.
you have all these writers getting these very well paid jobs, and so many of them, those films, those TV episodes, have never gotten made. Career screenwriters who have a lot of money, but they've never had anything actually produced. I
Produced.
think that's
Yeah, which
such a
is another.
symbol for what this industry can be.
Yeah, which is a thing, right? You can make a living doing that, but then that question of like, well, are you a produced screenwriter?
Right.
Which not a lot of people can point to that. They can have sold a bunch of stuff, doesn't mean it got made, And so it's interesting. It's an interesting business that we've chosen, that chose us, however you want to look at it. But I just want to jump back into the acquisitions thing for a bit because I know that's a big point of curiosity. So just like walk me through an example, maybe of a film that has already come across your way, and you don't have to say what project it is. Maybe one of the best experiences you had, or one of the most challenging of an acquisition, and the whole process, just so we can understand how that works.
Yeah. Sure. So I'll start with the first film I acquired at my new job at Utopia.
Yes, which congrats, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been a year now, so it's not that new, but
Yeah.
um so I acquired so I didn't go to Sundance last year. I was between jobs at that point, and Utopia hired me in end of February. But there were still films from Sundance that were available. So I watched a film called Bloody Nose, Empty Pockets, um, by the Ross brothers, who are
Mm.
these incredibly talented filmmakers who blend nonfiction with fiction elements in a really immersive and funny and fresh way. And so they did this film that got a good amount of attention and critical acclaim at Sundance last year, but was it's art house. I think a lot of people didn't understand it. Although critics loved it. Some people, it's about basically the last night of a dive bar for working class people in Las Vegas, like off the strip. But they kind of cast the regulars in the bar.
Oh, cool.
So they were real people playing themselves, but they were not like native to that bar. So they really like use these fiction elements. And it's just like you laugh, you cry. It's so real and funny and heartbreaking, and has just incredible moments between just these real working class humans, as the space where they go to relate to each other is gonna not be around anymore. So I saw it and I thought it was really special, and that this was still when theatrical was, this was a couple weeks before COVID. So like I thought that I was acquiring it for a small theatrical release. So part of it is you watch the film, what I evaluate it for. I mean, it depends if you're evaluating something for theatrical distribution or just digital. We do both, but basically you look at a film and you sort of think about who, one, if you love it is, I think, for me, the most important thing. There's definitely films that I've loved less that I feel are more marketable, but the number one thing is how compelling it is for me. And then, you know, we then like talk to our head of marketing and theatrical distribution and sales to get their take, because there is a financial element to it. So you want to get your head of sales to say, I think Netflix might be interested in this, or HBO. It's great to understand how much you think you can sell it to a platform for. That's a very important piece these days.
Well, how does that price get determined? Because I would imagine like what Utopia would be willing to pay is different from what someone else would be willing to pay. So is there like a formula? What is that?
Yeah, it's a lot of it is what we do is called running comps. So I'll see Bloody Nose, Empty Pockets, and look at over the last like 3 years. Anything longer than that is ancient, because the industry, that's how much the industry changes. You can't look at box office from 3 years ago because it's so different now, which is crazy. So you sort of think about other documentaries that have a similar audience. You look up what they've done and you run what they call comps, sort of like estimate the lowest numbers you'll make in any window, and then what you think you'll actually make, and then a best case scenario. And then you kind of come up with it through those projections. Work backward.
I've often wondered how comps are done now without theatrical to look at. Like so many comps are streamer films, Netflix movies and stuff. Right. And you're like, I don't know what this budget was, and I have no way of finding it. I guess it's this based on these elements, but it's even more of a guessing game, which is terrifying.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of distributors do have output deals with with the SVOD, like Hulu and Netflix. Neon, for example, has an output deal with Hulu.
Will you quickly define what an output deal is for the listeners?
Yes. So an output deal is when a distributor has a pre-existing deal with a streamer that all of their films will go to that streamer after their theatrical window for a certain price point. Usually that price point is based on things like, is it a foreign film or a documentary? Then the price point's lower, of course, because they don't value documentaries too much. And then what's the theatrical screen count going to be? How much marketing money, or P&A as we call it in the biz, that means print and advertising, if people don't know, are you doing? And all of that determines the price that Hulu's going to pay. But you know that there's a minimum floor, and then you can, and you know it's going to end up on Hulu, so you can then back into like a advanced number based on that, which is, it's a nice thing to have.
Yeah.
But it's also the reason why I've never had one at a company is that it also takes away like being able to have a film that everyone wants and bid people up and get the best price for it.
Right.
So
Okay. So you find something you love, then you kind of run it up the ladder or sideways to your fellow
right,
coworkers to see what they think. And if everybody's like, yeah, this is a go, we love this, here's how much we're willing to pay for it, you then go back to the filmmakers, the producers, or whoever it is that's, or the maybe there's a buyer or a sales agent rather. Yeah. And then you tell them this is what we're willing to do. And then they take it back to the filmmakers to see if they want to accept it. And that's
correct.
kind of
There's
it, right? There's not
well,
much
usually
negotiation.
so I'll send a deal memo. I know it's not going to be the last and final because there's a dance that you know you have to do.
Yeah.
Um, you kind of start with a lower number than you're prepared to go to because you know they're going to try to bid you up. So you build in buffer room for that. So they know you're starting lower than you can go. You know they're going to come back with a counter. But generally, the way they do it, which is psychologically good, it's actually really good. Emotional manipulation is that like they get your offer and they're like, okay, let's set a call with the filmmakers. And on that call, it's like a getting to know you pitch, basically. If we were at Sundance, we'd set up a meeting and my whole team would come in and we'd talk through the release plan and why we're the best company. And then the filmmakers would tell us things and we'd get to know them and be like, these guys are the best. Now we really want the film. That was great. What a great meeting. And that in your head, you're like, if that meeting goes well, then you're so excited that you're willing to pay more. It's just, that's what they're betting on, basically. So then the agents, so no financial terms are brought up at that meeting. It's strictly like a strategy pitch. We really want a partner, blah, blah, that kind of thing. And then you go back and then the agent takes you aside and is like, okay, I'll send you a counter tonight. And then they send you a counter that's probably ridiculous. Like it's like twice as much as you wanted to pay with some ridiculous terms. But you kind of know that based on the agent, what
Right.
get to know the agent's
You get the
pattern.
shorthand. Right, right, right.
And
Yeah.
then it's probably a couple more back and forths, and then you either lose the deal or you close the deal.
Yeah. And then from there, you off to the races to strategize, right, on all the good stuff
Mm-hmm.
that comes after, and that's when it ends on most people's screens.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
from there, though, I mean, there's still the really boring stuff of the legal
Yeah.
deliverables, which are the biggest
Which
nightmare.
is it's the nightmare, but I think it's an important thing that a lot of filmmakers, especially new filmmakers, don't pay attention to any of that stuff. They don't pay
Yes,
attention to it when they're budgeting during editorials sometimes. They don't
very
think
true.
about it when they're going out to their vendors and how much they're going to have to spend to do that. And so I think having been through that part of the process with some other films that weren't like personal films to me, where I was a part of the producing team, I learned that valuable lesson very early on, that you want to have all of that information ahead of time. And if your hope is to sell to a streamer, you should budget deliverables for a streamer off the bat. Just
Yes.
assume that that's what it's going to cost. And if it isn't, then you save money. Good for you.
Yeah,
But just assume that you're going to have to spend the money to get your dream version of that, right? And I think
yeah,
that's really valuable information. Some of that secret, mystical information we were talking about earlier that isn't often
definitely. No,
shared
that's
or
definitely
Googleable.
true. And you
Yeah.
can tell who the more seasoned producers are because once they've been through it a few times, delivering to a platform, like they have it all,
Which,
but
yeah.
they're like, yes, it's all on this drive, all the
Yeah.
legal is here, here's the
That's right.
email,
Yeah.
like here's the audio stamps. And they know that like you have to do all of that and they're so organized. But yes,
Yeah.
new
But
producer,
you
I
lived
mean,
through that nightmare once and then
yeah,
you're
I
more
wasn't like
it.
that. And then we had to deliver to POV. And like, I love
Oh,
you,
yeah.
POV, but that's a nightmare. They make you
Yeah.
list every single donor to the film to make sure
Oh,
there's conflict of interest. You know, everything from like the music cues and just stuff that I wasn't preparing as I was producing because I wasn't thinking about delivering.
yeah.
But it is, yes, it's the least fun part for
Mm.
both producer and distributor. I hate dealing with it, but it is like a huge component of getting to a
What's
release.
like a part of the process for you that you feel like there's a big misconception around?
I still think that people don't understand the whole distribution rollout and strategy around that as much as it's actually surprising how much I have to explain that. I think that people, and not that they should have
Well,
to, but
it would help everybody if they did, right? But like to our point earlier, where do you find that information? So then the question is,
yeah,
how do we do that? How do we be that change to help people understand it and have the tools to speak the vocabulary, so that everybody wins? You know, it's easier for you, it's easier for them, it's easier for people starting out to already start thinking about the realities of being a storyteller and the dreams that they have for their projects and the different potential, you know, ways that they can share their work. Like, do
yeah.
you have a sense? Is it like a class, or is it like, are you going to write a book
I would,
that we can
I
promote?
actually, I do think that
A
it should
how
be a
to?
class.
Yeah.
Uh, I do think there should be just more. There has been more mentorship, like in some places around producers recently. I mean, Sundance has always had the Creative Producers Lab, and I think IFP has been good around producers, but there have not been many distribution labs or, um, informative, aside from being on panels. And usually panels are fine, but a lot of times it's just like executives like me, like talking in the same lingo with like other
It's fluff.
executives.
I feel like its panels are very alienating because it's like, if you don't already speak the language, if you're not already in with the cool kids, you're just kind of lost a little bit.
Right.
And I find that a lot of people at panels are newer to whatever the thing is. The really
Yeah,
seasoned people have
exactly.
been to the panels. They're at home. They're not sitting there watching you guys have a
Right.
fun conversation. Like, so it is more entry level, mid level people. And like, again, I don't think we're giving them the resources and setting them up for success. And then everybody's frustrated. And it's like, guys, if we could just communicate clearly and effectively and more transparently, like we would save so much time and be so much more productive with the things that we're doing, and then maybe have time in our lives to do other things that we care about.
Yeah, I mean, I
You know?
think like as with producing in general,
Yeah.
there's not that many classes or places to go to even find out how to do that. I'd love to get your insight on everything you've learned talking to producers about, like, how
Yeah.
producers of today are learning how to be producers, and if there are more resources now. But I think distribution is still, unfortunately, the last thing that producers think about, simply because they have so much on their plate, and to have to think about
Yeah.
that on top of everything else, it's just like, oh, I have to learn
Well,
something.
I've never understood why we can't reverse engineer things. Like, if I have a script I'm developing, I want to be able to come to you and say, hey, Danielle, with all of your experience in the distribution space in the next few years, if I can get $1 million to make this movie, what's the probability that I'll be able to sell it for the price point in my comps? And you can
Right.
go, wow, Carolina, this is great. Of course, it's execution dependent on the filmmakers, and there's all kinds of things that are the magic of production and all the things that have to go right for a film to end well. But at least you have like parameters, right? Of like,
Yeah,
okay, if we can
absolutely.
get this in the can, then I know for a fact I can tell my investors that I have distributors who would be interested in this, provided that I can do all of these things up front. And I know that
Yes.
studios used to work in that way, where like marketing departments were involved before a movie went into
Right.
production, so
Yeah.
that you're not afterwards spending more money to now reshoots and like, oh, actually the poster doesn't sell the movie, so we have to, like, all of this weird backwards way of working that
Hmm.
I just, I don't know. It's like really bizarre. We're a really ineffective industry in that way. And like I said, like the amount of money we waste, like take that money, funnel it into helping support new voices and creating access for newer stories that maybe don't
Yeah.
sell for much, to get their shot at telling their stories. And so that's like what I would love to find a way to figure out, because even for me, like I came up physical producing, right? And so, with the exception of Autism in Love, which is kind of how you came into my life through Abby Davis, who's a dear
Yeah.
friend who was my sales rep on that movie. like I had never been through that process. And that was the first time I felt like
Right.
I'm legit, I'm here with fancy people who wear ties and are making deals for my movie. And it was a small doc and it was a very wonderful, like, slice of pie, just beautiful piece on adults with autism and romantic relationships. But like, I remember being in conversations and being like, I don't know what anyone is talking about, and having to put on this face of
Right.
like, very interesting. I'll look into that and get home and like Google it.
Yep.
but but it's
Yeah.
the only project to date really that I've been a part of that I wasn't a for hire producer on, right, where I was involved in raising the equity. Like every single thing about that movie I touched from start to finish, and it'll still be like my baby. But once I was able to get out of that, I've never understood how to reverse engineer it, right? Like I'll work on projects that already have distribution, and it's like I do my production part, and then I don't ever see all the next steps that happen to get it to screen. There aren't many places where you can go where you're getting the real deal, no bullshit information about what it is, unless you're on the inside with
Right.
somebody like you who's kind of keeping it real and sharing how it goes. And I don't
Yeah.
think that.
And a lot of executives don't share because they think that keeping information is the only way to have power, and that if everyone had that information, then their job would be threatened. I mean, it's a very like protective,
I
almost
get it.
like,
I understand it.
yeah.
Yeah. It's
But
merciless, right? In that way, where if you make one mistake, then the person, the powers that be will just fire you because you pass on that movie. You didn't make that
right.
deal. And it's
Which is
like,
why there's a lot of that second guessing of like, wait, I thought that film was terrible. Why did now A24 wants it and now this publicist is on? Maybe it's actually good.
you're like, am
And
I
critics are
delusional?
even like
Yeah.
following suit with that. I've seen it
Yeah.
happen. I've seen
Right.
a publicist convince A24 to buy something they thought they hated in Cannes. It was crazy that they
Yeah.
can just like put a bug in there, and that's the strategy. And then once that distributor is on it, everyone else is like, oh well, they've had a great track record. I mean, the problem with distribution is it's not a science, and all distributors, it's all optics, and like the people
Right.
you think are the best distributors have had just as many failures financially as everyone else,
Right.
but
Right.
those aren't the ones people ever remember.
Right.
So if you're just if you're good at PR and just more known for your Oscars and your successes, even if you've lost a lot of money, it ends up not mattering in the
Yeah.
public eye to the value of the company.
Yeah.
But
I
it's
mean,
not a science, and no one knows anything, and no one can predict anything either,
that's the
which is
thing.
why, yeah, there's all these
It's
rules like drama's tough, porn's tough, but like accents are tough. But at the Orchard, we bought Hunt for the Wilder People, and it did better than any other movie we've ever done, and that had accents. So, and a lot of Searchlight couldn't figure out like what to do with it.
yeah.
They wanted to, but they thought it was too risky. So there's things
Right.
like that where it's like there is just a culture of safety and
Well, it's fear based, right? It's an
yeah,
industry that's built on fear, and I think it is because, to your point, like there aren't metrics for any of this stuff. It's all
right,
guesses. Like you're saying, okay, well, on Memorial Day weekend 3 years ago, most movies of this type did this kind of business. So the
exactly,
probability that this will happen again is like in the 80 percentile. Thus, it is worthwhile taking the risk. Even if
exactly.
then for the next three Memorial Day weekends, for the next 3 years, it's the opposite. Then they'll go, okay, never release a movie on Memorial Day weekend. And then it's constantly changing. But what I find
Right,
fascinating, right, is that how long the production timeline takes. So like by the time I make my movie and you release the movie, if it's a fast cycle, it's like 3 years, right? And how much the market has changed in that time. So
exactly.
even though I sold you on comps from 3 years ago, realistically, by the time this comes out, we're talking 3 years into the future. So this is now 6 years old data. And it's just like bizarre that there isn't a more sustainable way of tracking it. And maybe the streamers now have that data, right? Because they can see to the minute, to the second, where
Right.
people are stopping to watch a movie, how many times they're rewinding apart, all of that. And I don't know. It's very interesting. I don't have a question. I have
Yeah.
just a
I
rant,
mean,
but
that's what they're trying to have all the data to predict everything in the world. But I
right.
still think sometimes you can have a movie that on paper and on screen is a slam dunk and it just doesn't work. It doesn't
Yeah.
translate. People
Yeah.
are like, maybe they're sick of, I don't know, that weekend, whatever it is.
Yeah.
There's films you can go into buying thinking like, this hits on all cylinders, it has great cast, it's funny, it's sad, old people will go see it in the theater, and then it has great reviews, and then it just like doesn't work, and you
Yeah.
don't know why. And
You
that
don't know
happened.
why.
So
And nobody ever really knows the why, right? I think that's the other myth. Like everybody can come up with all kinds of fluff language for the why, but truly you just don't know. In the same way that like you don't know why something does catch on and does succeed, and you can write a whole narrative about the why it did do well. It goes both ways, you know.
but I think what's important though is that, I mean, for me and as a buyer, the thing that gets me really excited is not buying a slam dunk with like great cast and it's funny and it works. It's like buying a discovery film where someone has really pushed the boundaries and has new vision, and it's like so exciting the whole time. You feel like you've discovered a new voice.
Yeah.
That's what I look, I mean, that really is what I look for, is
Yeah.
like something new and fresh and exciting. I do think that the good buyer, like the Neons and A24s, that's what they're looking for too. And I think it's important to stay true to one's vision, because that often is what works. And we have to see so many movies that anything that's like new and exciting and something we haven't seen before, even if it doesn't have cast, like if it's new cast who are great, I would just encourage people to not play by those rules of no accents and I don't know,
Yeah. I
because
love it.
if you have a vision that's good and passionate and new, that is more important to us than anything. We just want to be surprised, because all of the movies can just start blurring together because you're watching all day. As soon as you see something different or like a new idea, it's so exciting.
Yeah. And it's so funny because then people watch those movies and then they think, well, I'll write those movies because I think that's what they want to see because that's what they're making, that's what they're buying. So
Right, like the
it's like
Moonlight
yeah,
copycats after.
exactly. Right. Someone takes a big creative risk and then they succeed, and you get Little Miss Sunshine, you get Moonlight, you get all of these incredible movies, you get Parasite. And then here come the
Right.
people that think, all right, well, clearly this, and now you get like 100 of those until that no longer becomes unique. It's just
Yeah,
like another,
exactly.
yeah, it's interesting.
Exactly.
So I think to harp on that, like, yes, like staying true to your voice, finding your voice, and staying true to your vision and whatever it is that you're doing. I think that's one of the hardest part of the business, because it's easy to get lost in the weeds and not trust your instincts and your intuition
Yeah.
about who you are and what it is that you want to say.
Or you feel like you made a shitty film, even if it's sold well. You're not proud of it.
Exactly.
It's not great. I
Exactly. So
think
I,
that great films or work that you're proud of is the most important thing. And even if that didn't get a massive deal or, get you your next, just to be able to be proud of your, and sometimes you can work for 2 years producing something and know that it's not your best work and not the greatest, and that's okay.
yeah, you
Um,
just learn from it and go to the next thing. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I
I,
want to talk really briefly about the art of negotiating, because I think that you've hinted at it during this conversation. And I know negotiating is hard for many people, especially women, especially when you're starting out. What advice do you have? Like, how have you mastered this for yourself? What's the secret? Share it with us.
I don't think I've mastered it. I still don't think I'm good at it. But I used to, at the beginning, I read a lot of articles about the art of negotiation and all these rules you're supposed to stick to. And I've never just been very good at it because I like to be honest. Um, and I don't like to play a lot of these games.
Mm,
So I think just getting comfortable with negotiation is the hardest part. Even if you don't have like a strategy, just being able to turn down a deal that you think is bad, or like just speak very plainly and transparently about why that doesn't work for you, or why, like, sometimes I'll just honestly say like, look, I would love to give this film more money, and it's not how I'm valuing the film. It's just simply because, like all indie distributors, we have budgets, and we'd rather just give more money to the planning and marketing of the film. Um, it's just, for me, it's more about honesty than anything. And it took me a while to be comfortable with not pleasing everyone and just saying no to things that people wanted. And I've gotten more comfortable with it just through like being honest about why it doesn't work for me or the company financially, because that is what I have to protect. I want to be kind to filmmakers and I want to give them, the best deals possible, but I'm also here to make sure that independent film distributors like us stay around and don't like break all our budgets. And it's sometimes a tricky position, but so it's more like a level of comfort that took me a while to get used to. I don't think I'm a master of it, but it's just a process that you have to do, and just bring your own personality to the table. And if you don't feel comfortable manipulating, then just don't.
Yeah. I have two final questions for you. But we talked briefly about the value of relationships, right? And how that's one of the things that people don't ever tell you. And I often felt like, oh man, like I didn't go the assistant route. I didn't work at an agency. I didn't come up on a desk. Like I don't know all the players, right? Because everybody goes in at the low level and they rise up, they move up, everybody moves up. And you know the people that have moved up because you're also moving up. And so, like, how do you recommend someone who hasn't maybe also gone down that path in doing that networking thing, because the word networking can carry such a negative gross connotation, but like in truly meeting not just people but the right people? Like how do you identify who are the right people that you should be meeting based on the specific thing you want to do, and then actually go meet them without being a weirdo?
I think there's two things. I think one is a lot of research, and I remember specifically like meeting Ted Sarandos at a party at Sundance, and just briefly, and then digging up his email through someone else and writing him like a long essay, a really long impassioned essay. And he actually wrote back. This was like very early on in, Netflix. They were still just doing DVDs, but I think one is just not being afraid to like do your homework, just do the research, know a lot about that person, so that when they get an email from a young person that's very specific to their career, it actually resonates. And I've had people reach out to me and who like, at first it can be a little off-putting. You're like, wow, you really Googled me? What have you seen? But it's actually, then you're like, okay, I really appreciate that you took the time to do all this research and really know about me. And you clearly are ambitious. That's what it, and you did your homework, and I'm not just one of like 1,000 people you reached out to.
You're not cold emailing, copy paste.
So yeah, like target really specifically people who you admire, from distributors to producers to direct, whoever that is. And then I would just say, like, you never know who's going to be the next industry leader or the next big hotshot producer or executive. It could be your intern. So just be kind to everyone. Just like be a good person. And don't think like that guy over there is important, so you treat your intern like shit.
That's right.
I mean, it's not just for your own growth. It's good to just be nice and respectful of everyone.
For your soul.
It goes a long way. But sometimes it really does pay off. In that, like, everyone has the capacity for greatness, and you never know who that person is, and they will appreciate and remember that you were a decent person to them when you were young and nobody. So just try to treat everyone with respect and not look down on people. That's also what I would say.
I love that. This is my final question before I let you go, but what advice did you receive early on in your career that actually helped you?
I think the advice I received early on in my life that was most helpful to me
it could be in your life.
Was suck it up.
What does that
Um,
mean to you? What does that phrase
to
mean to
me,
you?
that just meant that I would sort of overthink everything and fall into like, if I felt rejected by someone or I wasn't getting anywhere, then it would just be like wallowing in my own self-hatred and pity. And that's the least effective thing you can do.
Yeah.
And I just think you have to have a thick skin, especially in this business, especially being a woman in this business,
Hmm.
surrounded by lots of men. And that is changing, but it's still very, very imbalanced.
Right.
So, um, not to take things too personally is
Yeah.
also very good. Um,
It's good.
yeah.
Hard to do sometimes. I think it's a lifelong journey there, but at least that's
And
been my experience. But
it's true, but like everyone in this business is deeply insecure.
yeah,
I, I'm convinced of it. And no one
it's
knows what they're doing too. That's the other thing. I tell myself this like every day is like, because we also, I think, as women have a problem with not feeling like frauds and really
mm,
feeling like we deserve to be where we are. It's been a big problem for me. At any minute, it's like, I shouldn't be here. People will know that I don't know all these things. But what you have to understand is that no one knows all these things. And it's
right.
not science, and everyone's just trying to do the best they can and act like they're experts, but we're all just insecure and and that's it. I mean,
That's it.
that
Yeah.
makes me feel a lot better when I'm having to do something that's really
Yeah. Yeah.
intimidating to me or talk to like someone who I'm intimidated by.
Yeah. You just remember they're just a person just like you. Yeah. I'm so grateful to you for sharing and for spending this hour with me and the listeners and just being so honest and transparent about it. I think that's what it's about. I think there are many wonderful podcasts out there where you can hear about different aspects of the business and different career paths, but there really isn't a place to really dive in and have these conversations in an organic way. And I'm only as good as my guests' willingness to talk about this stuff very openly. And so thank you to you for saying yes, for spending this time with me. I'm so happy.
Well, thank you. And I love that you're doing this. I
Yeah.
think it's going to be really helpful and a great resource for a lot of people.